I think it's probably fair, first of all, to reflect a little bit on today's news and the annual report. The Taxpayers Alliance are right, as ever, to focus on the salaries of not just the stars, but I think crucially the executives behind the scenes, the ones who are making the decisions on our behalf with no accountability. And that has always been, as someone who actually worked at the BBC for 5 years, from 2002 and 2007, and actually has a lot of value and actually puts a lot of store and value by the organisation, I have to say as well. I do think that it is clearly an organisation which is management top heavy, an organisation which is rewards in a non-commercial way and rewards in ways which actually, frankly, beg a belief quite often. I am reminded a few years ago of Jonathan Ross and his multi-million pound package at the BBC, where they said at the time that he would have got more in the commercial sector. Well, Jonathan Ross soon departed to the commercial sector, and I can tell you he didn't get any more. When it comes to more generally, obviously, there's some welcome. I believe that Gary Lineker has taken a pay cut of sorts, but we can always go for more. I have been encouraged, I have to say, to give credit where credit is due by Tim Davies' first couple of weeks, where he has basically stated some, I thought, what a statement in the bleeding obvious, frankly, that he felt that partiality was an issue. And that he wanted basically to get back to, or return, or encourage, anyway, a greater degree of partiality in partiality in its reportage, and also to think of the sort of the steady drip that we do have from many parts of the BBC of what we can only describe as very one-eyed, very sort of W1A focused content, which seems to just sort of perhaps isolate itself from large parts of the United Kingdom. And Parliament has changed massively ever since the election, and ever since actually the shake-up of the Conservative Party after the disaster was Theresa May's premiership. And what we've seen is a very strong cohort of new MPs, Red Wall and beyond, who have a much more who have a sceptical view of the BBC, and in that they're reflecting their constituents. They're reflecting the fact that they don't feel that the BBC talks to them, perhaps in the way it did a generation or so ago. And they feel as if, frankly, that it's almost like it's the Reithian values that the BBC has now adopted are almost sort of like to try and mould society rather than reflect society. I think I've put that in question form to them when I asked them, "Are you too woke?" And the answer to that, yes, of course they are. And that reflects basically a desire, a groupthink within the organisation, which comes from shared educational, shared sort of backgrounds, a sort of culture of of basically staying to the norm, of not actually sort of thinking outside of your own reference frame. You never go very far you never sort of lose any place in the BBC by deciding to go on a sort of slightly left-wing agenda. You will always find a warm home for any ideas in that sort of way, because it often feels these days as if it doesn't connect to the British people. It feels a bipolar organisation. All because you basically land a load of people in Salford doesn't mean that you are somehow that you are connected, that you are rooted. It's almost like Planet Zog has arrived in Media City, and then you've got London. So you've got this sort of bipolar. And what's happened there is there's been an emptying out of the rest of the country. I mean, frankly, this bipolar organisation, the deal that was struck by Mark Thompson post the Hutton report with him and a rather angry Labour government in order basically to persuade them to not take an axe to the licence fee. And that was his bid, basically. I will move a load of jobs into effectively Labour sporting areas, and we'll boost Manchester. Wonderful for Salford, fantastic. But at the same time, it has led to an emptying out of the rest of the country. And I think the BBC has suffered from that, actually, because it hasn't had that bottom-up approach, that sort of ground-up approach that you do get from good local reporting and also, frankly, local connection. Instead, it's created two sort of groupthink centres in London and Manchester, which basically just sort of revolve around each other. And that itself, I think, has helped bring about, in particular areas such as, for example, the discussions over Brexit, where there was just a misunderstanding. A, they could not believe that anyone could vote for Brexit. And then secondly, if they'd done so, frankly, they were mistaken to do so. But the truth of the matter is that you talk to anyone under 35 and ask them to name a BBC programme they watch, and they may not be able to do it. Maybe EastEnders, maybe. That is because basically it's not connecting, and because basically the platforms that get on is not as vibrant as it needs to be. It feels a bit of a sort of sunset, to a certain degree, a sort of sunset industry. And I think it needs to reinvent itself quite quickly. But we have a great opportunity now. We've got the midpoint of the Charter Review. We have the potential for decriminalisation. I will raise my flag very clearly. I wish to see it decriminalised. My view is that it's an aberration that we're criminalising young women for not paying, because that is the biggest means by which you criminalise young women in this country, is non-payment of licence. And although it doesn't take up a huge amount of court time, it does have a very detrimental effect on the poor in this country, and frankly those who perhaps for whatever reasons are either unable or incapable, maybe through mental health reasons, etc., of actually paying. And I just think morally as well, I think that it's counterintuitive now, it's countercultural to have an organisation which effectively could ultimately send you to prison for not paying, whereas, if you don't pay your gas bill, you don't end up in prison, do you?